What do you get whenever you take a dirt bike or dual sport that's built for the off-road world and you equip it with a street setup? You arrive at a supermoto. Suzuki has a long-standing history in this space with the DR-Z4SM, which originally made its debut back in 2005. That bike remained mostly unchanged for the next 20 years, up until 2025. Hi, I'm Omni, or at least I was Omni. My name is actually Ian, and this is probably the first time a lot of you are seeing my face. If you missed my face reveal, no need to go back and watch it because, hi. But if you want to see that dramatic reveal, go back and watch this video. You clicked on this video because you saw the thumbnail about the new DR-Z4SM, and that's exactly what we're talking about today. If you've been here before, you know the entire purpose of this is to bring you a conclusion at the end to determine whether or not this machine here in front of me is worth your dollar and you should make it a good buy and add it to your stable, or if you should pass on it and say goodbye and move on to the next one. If by now you've decided that you actually aren't interested in this motorcycle, I've got plenty of other videos for you to check out in this catalog right up here. But here's what's on the agenda for this motorcycle today. First up, I've got to bring you up to speed and give you a very brief history on the origins of the DR-Z4 and or the DR-Z4SM. And as always, I have to bring you the specs on it because I can read off of a spec sheet and maybe you're just too lazy to do that, and that's all right. That's why I'm here. And I also want to cover all of the new features and whatnot that Suzuki has for the 2025 model year on the new DR-Z4. And we'll talk about the price too, because for me, that is a pretty big sticking point on this motorcycle. And after we've completed those first few segments of the video, I'm gonna take a seat behind the bars, put the GoPro on, and take you out for a test ride just to show you how it performs in a real world environment. Before we get started, I do want to let you know, this channel is not sponsored by Revzilla, but I am one of their affiliates, which means I can post links in my description, and if you use those links to buy something, I get a piece of the pie. Now, granted, for the most part, it is mostly crumbs, but if enough people purchase through those links, it adds up to a pretty big amount, which I would appreciate if you did, but I'm not going to beg you to do it. As always, if you enjoyed this video by the end of it, please consider leaving a like on it so we can reach an audience that has similar interests to you. If you want to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me, especially those of you who said that you wouldn't subscribe whenever I was wearing my helmet. Don't know why me wearing a helmet has anything to do with your ability to retain the knowledge that I present to you, but whatever, man. Now you have a reason to hit that sub button because the helmet's off. Let's start from the beginning. The first DR-Z was introduced as a dual sport from Suzuki. It was the DR-Z400. This was the answer to the big dual sport boom, and honestly, Suzuki was a little bit late to the party, but they came very well prepared, they did their homework, and they delivered a product that was reliable and affordable. It brought plenty of competitive advantages to attract buyers. It was lightweight, fairly responsive, and you could work on it yourself in your garage because everything was still mechanically simple. No fuel injection, no ride modes, no traction control, no ABS, just a motor, the transmission, and the rider behind the bars. And then 5 years later, Suzuki dropped the DR-Z400SM. SM just meaning supermoto. But this wasn't a custom one-off job, this was a factory option. It featured 17-inch wheels with street-going tires, upgraded brakes, different suspension, and much better on-road manners. But then, they didn't change it for nearly 20 years. That model was in production for so long, it was almost old enough to buy alcohol on its own here in the USA. And it was kind of sad because it was a cult classic that had proven the reliability and the durability and the dependability that Suzuki brought to the table with that machine. But that machine and that status slowly turned into a meme, especially whenever we started getting over 10 years of production. When's the last time that you saw a motorcycle that hadn't changed in nearly over 20 years? Outside of the Yamaha TW200. Or the DR-650 made by the same guys, let's not go there. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those bikes, but today demands a different type of standard for what we would accept as a consumer for what we pay. And it seems like these prices keep going up, and I understand inflation is real. But the cost to produce this machine, the research and development, all of that was done over 20 years ago. So from this point, it's basically just buy the parts it costs, produce the machine, sell it to the dealership for profit. And that profit has gotten larger every year because that research and development was done so long ago. And people just begged for things like fuel injection, a 6th gear, better brakes, and what was Suzuki's answer? Nah, it works. And then something clicked. Enter the big 2025, and Suzuki relaunches and re-releases the all-new updated DR-Z4SM. It basically got a complete overhaul and a redesign using only about 20% of the parts from the previous generation, while everything else is mostly new. New frame, new motor, new throttle system, toggleable ABS, traction control and ride modes thanks to that new throttle, and styling that finally keeps up with modern design demands. Oh, and did I mention fuel injection? Yeah, we've got that now. But is it enough to compete with the other machines in this segment? I'm talking, of course, about Kawasaki's KLX 300SM, as well as KTM 390 SMCR. But we'll talk more about those two machines later out on the test ride, so make sure you stick around or just skip ahead now. Now that we're up to speed, let's talk about the specs on this new model. I'll draw your attention first to the front, to the brakes. This is a 310mm floating disc, pinched between a 2-piston, axially mounted Nissan caliper. The brake setup in the rear is another disc, obviously, with a single piston Nissan caliper. Neat thing about this rear brake, though, is that you can shut the ABS off so that only your front is engaged and you are free to slide your tire around. For some reason, Suzuki didn't post the diameter of the forks on their website, but if it's anything like the last generation, they should be a set of 49mm forks. Now, these are completely adjustable like the last generation. However, these are KYB forks, which I think is different from the previously used Showa suspension found on the DR-Z4SM of yesteryear. Oh, and now to the motor. This is a all new, mostly new, like 70% new, 398cc dual overhead cam, liquid cooled single cylinder, now featuring fuel injection, with 2 iridium spark plugs, ensuring for a very efficient burn, making sure that we don't leave any fuel left behind. At 8,000 RPM, this motor delivers a peak output of about 38 horsepower. And 1,500 RPM prior to that, it makes its peak torque output of 27 pound-foot. I estimate top speed being somewhere between 95 and 100 miles per hour. One area where Suzuki maybe fell a little bit short to me is the transmission. They left it as a 5-speed. This does contribute to some weight savings. However, I think that we would have accepted the additional weight in favor of a longer final drive gear for better commuting. But I think Suzuki knows that the DR-Z4SM is not really made to be a long-distance commuter, so they left it a 5-speed. But 5th as the final drive gear is still pretty tall, so you can hold highway speed fairly okay, but you don't have a ton of roll-on power. And as an added bonus, since this bike is kind of a low-power machine and maybe targeted at a crowd who doesn't need a ton of power and might still be new to riding, it is an assist and slipper clutch. I measure in at 6 foot 1 inches tall. My inseam measures up at 32 inches. The seat height on Suzuki's website is measured at 35 inches, but that is just the unladen seat height. And it's pretty narrow in the saddle, so what you'll find is that whenever someone of my size and stature with an inseam like mine gets on the bike, you'll see it squat a few inches, and I can get my feet completely flat on the ground on both sides because it is so narrow. This makes it very approachable for a wide variety of riders. I'd say as long as you're at least 5'8", you should be able to at least get the balls of your feet on the ground, maybe your tippy toes. And if you're much shorter than that, you're probably gonna have to only have one foot down, scoot a cheek off the seat, and put the other foot on the peg to hold this bike up when you're stopped. But getting on the bike is only half the battle. You do still have to ride the bike, and if we're riding the bike, we should probably know how far we can ride it, which is why I want to talk about the usable range on the DR-Z4SM. This has a 2.3 gallon tank. It gets anywhere between 55 to 60 claimed miles per gallon. Doing the simple math, roughly 2 gallons, 55 miles to the gallon, that sounds to me about like 110 miles of range. Add in the other 0.3 of fuel, and you're probably maxing this thing out at about 120 to 140 miles on a good day, which means that your usable range before you should stop and consider filling up is realistically like 80 to 100. Not great, but it's a supermoto, not made for the long haul. So when I say not great, I'm just referring to other bikes with more range that are more geared for longer distance touring. So if you're hoping for good range on a DR-Z4SM, what I will say to you is go check out some of my other videos and find a bike that's better than this for what you want to do, because this ain't it. But I will give the nod. 55 miles to the gallon on a little single cylinder, that is pretty efficient. So those are the hard specs, and really anyone could find those. And you could probably find this next part that I'm going to tell you about, where we're going to talk about some features on the DR-Z. So I'll just walk you around the bike and see what we can come up with. First up, we have some new lighting and styling up at the front. I think this is very, very well done by Suzuki. Love this. A+ job on the way that the new DR-Z4SM looks. Also got to give credit on not just the white plastics and everything, but I love the decision they made to bring back the blue wheels. I believe these are Excel rims with the spoked setup, so big ups to Suzuki for using a quality manufacturer on their product, which probably contributes to some of the price tag, which we still need to talk about. But before we do, another thing, you get the Dunlop Sport Max on these bad boys. Let's talk about tires real quick. Dunlop Sport Max Q5A. This tire actually has quite a bit of grip, but you'll have a hard time finding the limits of it out in the real world. Now, on a track, I'm sure that you'll find that there is quite a bit of compromise whenever you're riding on the street compared to a prepped surface. But for day-to-day use, this is a pretty solid choice that Suzuki has stuck on this machine. The seat has a pretty good amount of cushion to it. I mean, that's pretty nice right there. You know, it's got a good squish to it. Whenever I rode it over here to the warehouse, also felt pretty solid, but that was maybe a 2-minute ride. We'll see how it feels out on the test ride, but let's make our way up into the cockpit and let's flip this key over. I was super surprised to see Suzuki did not do some kind of color display on this, and I was also even more surprised to see there's no tachometer. Where are my RPMs, Suzuki? I'm a little upset about that, but is what it is, not the end of the world. ABS on-off switch right here, so you hold that down, and if the bike is on, oh, nope, there we go. Even if it's off, you can shut it off before you ever start it. We also have our selectable ride modes controlled by this switch over here, so I can put it in A mode, B mode, or C mode, basically rain, street, and sport mode, and 2 levels of traction control before you shut it off, so minimal interference, more interference, no interference. So you're free to slide the rear wheel around and pull the wheel in the air. There's our little adjustment spots for our forks right on the caps there. And to kind of cap it all off, LED lighting package around the entire machine. Looks super good, nice and bright, very visible, and doesn't clash too much with the rest of the styling of the machine. As always, our lovely rear fender came to play because it's required. I will get a fender eliminator on all of my motorcycles forever and ever because this is horrible, not Suzuki's fault. It is required by governing bodies that manufacturers put that stuff on these motorcycles, much like the very choked up emissions restrictions on exhaust systems. You can see that this pipe, I'm not sure if this is some sort of resonance chamber that helps with not back pressure, but some other sort of emissions regulation. Like, is this a catalytic converter that they're hiding in here? Because if so, then that means that this, from the header down with that O2 sensor right there, sweeping all the way back to our muffler, has to be, yep, one solid piece, which means that you can only do a full system on this bike unless you have a slip-on lying around and a buddy with a welder to put this exhaust tip on. Okay, another weird feature on the DR-Z4SM is where we add the oil. It is still in the frame right here by the steering neck. I find that to be a little bizarre that they kept it that way, but I guess we can have some heritage sticking around. Whew. So feature overview is pretty basic on this bike because it's a pretty basic bike just all around. Let's go ahead and let you guys have a listen to the exhaust. I believe that you have earned that at this point, listening to me yap for this long. What are we at, like 10 minutes now? So let's fire it up, let's let it get warmed up, and we'll give it a few revs so you can hear how it sounds. All right, well, you heard it. So now let's go for a test ride. Oh boy, here we are testing out the new DR-Z4SM. We are at Big St. Charles Motorsports. This is their rider training course area over here, but it's currently vacant. So I will be using it for low speed testing on the 4SM just to see how it fares. Let's try to get some heat worked into everything, start that mating process for the surfaces. Oh yeah, let's put us in B mode. I feel like that throttle is a bit much for what we're doing right now. B mode is your street mode, a little bit less responsive, a little bit softer upon opening the throttle. All right, let's do a brake test to kick things off. Let's go ahead and set some marks. For our brake test, let's use this green line. Let's start braking right here and let's see how quickly we can get it done. On average, an American parking space is roughly 8 feet wide to 9 feet wide. I don't like using halves, so let's just assume 8 feet wide. And just quick FYI, I'm using the front and the rear brake, a combo of both, to achieve these results. So if you use one or the other, they may vary. Let's go the other way so we can accelerate properly, and let's get to 30 miles per hour and then jam on those brakes. Okay, ABS did its thing for sure. Started at the green line, so we made it 1, 2, 3, 3.5 parking spaces. Let's go try it again. Let's get the surfaces mated a little bit better. Man, you can really stand on those things. That is a very, very good feeling brake lever. 30. 1, 2, 2 3/4. That's better than the last one. Let's try again. This will be our last run. That's our best result yet. That's still about 1, 2, and 2 3/4. We're stopping somewhere in the neighborhood of like 21 to 23 feet, depending on conditions, PSI, rider weight, and how much fuel is in the tank as well. A lot of variables that go into that, so your results may vary. Let's see how tightly we can get this thing turned around. Let's find ourselves 2 parking spots, like these guys right here. Let's turn that wheel and let's give her heck. I mean, that's almost 1 parking space. The amount of control that I feel on this motorcycle, I have not felt a bike that I've gelled with more instantaneously than the DR-Z4SM. Super, super impressed just right away. Let's turn that rear ABS off. And once you get really familiar with this bike, now that the ABS is off, you can slide that rear around if you load the front up nice enough. Oh yeah, that's pretty sick. It just feels good. The bike feels so good. Yeah, that is a lot of fun. And I mean, it just makes you want to hit every chance you get. What a fantastic machine right away. The low speed test, big thumbs up. DR-Z4SM. Let's get you out in the real world now and see how you handle it. I know you guys don't like interruptions, so I am sorry for that. But I must do my part to thank the guys who make these videos possible. It's Big St. Charles Motorsports. So, if you would, please watch this ad.
They got Kawasaki, Suzuki, and KTM too. Whether off-road or on, they're built for you. From youth dirt bikes to the big 1000cc, at Big St. Charles there's something for every family. Race fuel burning with oil on the side, local delivery, they'll bring you a ride. We got 2 strokes and 4 strokes ready to roll. Parts, service, and sales, they'll feed your soul. Calendar girls and bike nights under the stars. Big St. Charles, where you're taking charge. At Big St. Charles, they treat you right. 2,000 bikes ready under the showroom light. Financing's easy, whether it's big or small. 636-946-6487. Give them a call. Big St. Charles, where the road begins. Hop on that saddle, rev up that D-twin.
If you watched that, thank you so much. Let's get back to the video. Obviously, in the slick, grassy surfaces, these street tires are not the best choice. So be wary of that. If you're planning on doing some off-roading, the Supermoto may not be your ideal candidate. So on Suzuki's website, they claim that peak horsepower arrives at 8,000 RPM at roughly 38 horsepower, which I wish I knew where I was in the RPM range so I knew how much horsepower or torque my motor was liable to produce. But a tachometer is something that Suzuki felt the need to leave off of the DR-Z4SM. Let's talk about mirrors very quickly so I don't forget to do it later. There is great usability on these mirrors. There's a lot of vibration from the machine though, and it transfers into the mirrors, but it is a single cylinder that is part of the nature of this. No matter how much you try to counterbalance it, you might be able to effectively reduce much of the vibrations coming from the motor, but it can never be perfectly 100% balanced, which is the unfortunate harsh reality of a machine like this, but you should know that going into it if you're looking at one. Seat is nice and flat, so regardless of what size you are, you can move all over this thing to where you're comfortable with and find a spot that should work for you. Foot pegs are directly underneath of you as well for a very nice and controlled feeling. I can see where at speed this bike begins to feel a little bit floaty in the front end. I'm only ramping it up to 60, and though it does feel more planted than a supermoto I rode long ago, the KLX 230 SM, these just are not very confidence-inspiring machines at high speed. But I think where supermotos really shine is mostly low speed up to about 55 miles per hour. Anything before that is loads of fun, and the bike just begs to be ridden in a manner that exudes spunkiness. And though this test ride thus far has proven to be quite fun, I must talk about the one area that I think Suzuki really dropped the ball with the new DR-Z4SM. It's the price. And maybe you're sitting there right now and wondering to yourself, what is the price of the DR-Z4SM? As of today, July 23rd, 2025, Suzuki Cycles USA website has the DR-Z4SM listed at, take a seat for this one, $89.99. That is $9,000 essentially for a bike that makes less than 40 horsepower. And maybe you're thinking, well, they can justify that. It's a quality machine. Let's talk through some other motorcycles that are not only cheaper, but make more power. First up, tried and true, Kawasaki Ninja 500. That bike makes 50 horsepower and comes in at a starting base price of $52.99 here in the USA. To get it with ABS, which would be more comparable to this, I think it starts at like $56.99. We're still several thousand away from $89.99 of the DR-Z4SM. Another bike I want to point to is Suzuki's very own GSX-8S, starting somewhere around $9,300 USD, and this bike makes less than half of the horsepower of that bike. The GSX-8S makes 82 horsepower. This bike, once more, makes south of 40 at 38. The GSX-8S also features a 2-cylinder motor, which is more moving parts, also features a ride-by-wire throttle, also features traction control, also features ABS, and also features a bidirectional quick shifter as well. That's a lot of tech packed into a bike that is not only requiring more pieces to be put together, but also makes double the power, and it comes in at just a small price increase of $9,300. But it does weigh a considerable amount more, and they don't really do the exact same thing, though that bike does a lot of what this bike does. And another bike that I want to draw your attention to that's in the mix that should be brought up whenever price to performance come into play is the all-new Honda CB750 Hornet here in the US market. I just did a video on that recently, so I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about it right now, but the price tag on that is exactly $1,000 less than a DR-Z4SM, coming in at just $79.99. Features a lot of the same tech as the aforementioned GSX-8S, and is just amazing value for what that bike is. So I have a really hard time stomaching the price tag on the DR-Z4SM. And I think what rubs me the wrong way the most, this segment of motorcycle is supposed to be accessible for newer riders, because let's be real, 40 horsepower is a pretty good place for a US-based new rider to get started. And there are other options in this class from 2 other manufacturers that I want to slot into the conversation now. One being Kawasaki's KLX 300 SM. Though being considerably less powerful at just 25 horsepower, it is considerably less hefty. It comes in at a hair over 300 pounds, I'm pretty sure, and the price tag is where it really becomes bang on value at just $5,849. That's a little bit over a $3,000 difference from this bike to that bike, and they both do a lot of the same thing. And though ride-by-wire on the 4SM is nice, the traction control is nice, I don't think that we needed those items on this machine. So as cool as they are, kind of up in the air on whether or not it was worth it for Suzuki to add them to this bike if it was going to drive the cost up to nearly $10,000. Enter candidate number 2. This is the most logical choice in this class, in my opinion. If it were not for the very poor reputation of the company, KTM 390 SMCR. Obviously, they are in some financial troubles as of late, if you've been in the loop on the world of two wheels and what's going on over there in Austria. They're not doing so hot, but they do still keep releasing new motorcycles, and the 390 SMCR was one of them. That bike comes in with a starting price tag of just $54.99. That is $3,500 difference from that to the DR-Z4SM, and it makes even more horsepower and is even more lightweight and features all of the same technology, with suspension that is even easier to adjust and brakes that are even a little bit more high spec. So how can Suzuki justify this price tag? I don't have an answer for that. And I'm a salesperson at the dealership where we sell these. I can't justify that price tag. If I can't justify it as a salesperson, how the hell am I supposed to tell somebody else that it's worth it if they want to come buy one? Big St. Charles currently has them discounted by like $1,000 just to try to get some kind of traction going on them and get buyer attention. But even that hasn't seemed to be enough. So I think Suzuki really needs to consider going back to the drawing board and figuring out what they're going to do to attract buyers, because nearly $10,000 for 40 horsepower, that is the kind of shit that we make fun of Harley Davidson Sportster buyers for. So I hope Suzuki does come out with some sort of significant rebates to bring this bike closer down to the, oh gosh, I don't even want to say this, like the $69.99 price tag is where this bike should have landed, in my opinion. Where they have it right now is not realistic. Maybe some diehard Suzuki fans will go for that, but I would never spend that much money on 40 horsepower. Ever. I'll go out and buy a street naked Kawasaki Z500 for almost half of that and have a more capable machine in terms of practicality. The DRZ, while yes, more lightweight, maybe has a little bit more fun factor to it, that is just so hard to justify. I'll stop rambling about that now because we're about to get on the highway, so let's get ourselves mentally prepared for that. I know I said I'd stop talking about it, but I do want to hear your guys' opinions in the comments below. Did Suzuki take it too far with the price tag on this machine? Is it justifiable? Do you think they need to reevaluate where they're at in the market? Let a brother know. Let's get on the highway. The motor does have really good top end pull for a single cylinder. I will give it the nod there. And we are currently in 5th gear at 75 miles per hour. Feels like we're holding it pretty well, but you can see that we are a little wobbly up on the front end. So getting much faster than this, you're going to lose a ton of stability and probably lose a ton of confidence in your bike. So I would say 75 to 80 miles per hour is probably all that you want to do, but we're going to go a little bit more until I don't feel comfortable and see what we can do top speed wise. About 90 miles per hour is all the DR-Z4SM has. If you're lighter than me, you could probably get a few more out of it, maybe touch 100 miles per hour, but right there I could do 90. So passing power, that's really all you've got, is 70 to 90 miles per hour. So if you're planning on getting into a high-speed chase, maybe reevaluate and stick to the more narrow streets where you have better opportunity to dart off down alleyways and narrow passes to get away. Or maybe just don't run at all and pull over. But hey, I'm not here to tell you how to be a citizen. You do you, big dog. But that's our highway capability on the DR-Z4SM. If you've been here before, then you know where we are going next. We're going to do some 0 to 60 testing. And we're probably at about the halfway point right now in the video, which is a perfect opportunity to remind all of you watching that we are an affiliate for RevZilla.com. This is a place where you can get great gear like Alpine Stars gloves, get yourself some nice protective boots, and all sorts of other riding gear. But we're here to do some 0 to 60 testing. So let's do it. Let's get ourselves put into A mode so we have maximum throttle response And let's try to launch this puppy and get it to 60 as quickly as possible. 2025 Suzuki DR-Z4SM 0 to 60 test. 3, 2, 1, go. 60. That felt pretty pitiful. Okay, that was the first take. We can do much better. So let's try it again. 2025 Suzuki DR-Z4SM 0 to 60. 3, 2, 1, go. 60. I felt pretty okay about that. I think maybe we give it one more try. 2025 Suzuki DR-Z4SM 0 to 60, last chance. 3, 2, 1, go. 60. All right. I think that's the best that we're gonna get. Now we have to answer the question, does the 2025 DR-Z4SM wheelie? Well, once you turn off traction control and you figure out where to rev the bike to get the wheel to come up, yeah, it wheelies, and you don't even have to clutch up it. You can just start in first, put it in A mode, and snap on the throttle like this, and achieve a pretty good result. Or you could start in second like this, clutch in, rev, and achieve a great result. We're in A mode. Let's go to B mode, get a little bit more control there, and try it again. All right, we are in B mode. Here we go. Hey, yep. That was a pretty good wheelie. We rode that one out, clicked up through third from first. Not half bad. This is hands down the most control I've ever felt on a motorcycle, being my first time riding it. I'm really enjoying my time, but I just keep going back to that price tag and how I would never pay that. But, you know, doesn't matter whenever you got all the money in the world. This bike is so much fun. I need to stop before I hurt myself or hurt the bike. But it's just so much fun. It's hard to stop. Makes you want to stay on and keep going. All right, let's get out of here. We did our testing. We have our answers. Let's try to make our way back. Yeah, see, whenever you're just kind of putzing along at 50 miles per hour, it's a super relaxed ride. And now that we've been going for, 15, 20 minutes in the saddle, gotta say, pretty solid performance. Not terrible. I could see after maybe a little bit longer you need to get off, stretch yourself out, but you should do that with any motorcycle, honestly. But as it is, pretty solid. Not a lot of complaints out of me. I would probably take that seat strap off, because that's the only thing I can really feel as of now. That's maybe muddying the waters on my experience. And it seems like a supermoto is almost the most raw form of a motorcycle. It has the lightest frame and forces you to use the rest of the bike and its available assets to get the most out of it. I think that's the fun part about riding motorcycles, is figuring out how to make them work the best. One of the downsides to a supermoto is that everything is very exposed, which has a disadvantage and an advantage. Whenever you're stopped, all you feel is the heat coming up from the motor onto you and making you even hotter than it already is outside that day. But the benefit to that is that your engine gets additional air flowing over it, which for the most part keeps things pretty cool. I can completely understand the hype behind supermotos. And I hope that after watching this video, if you didn't understand the hype, maybe I shed a little bit of light on it for you to better help you understand what these are all about. And for the most part, it looks like our fuel estimates were fairly accurate. 49.9 mpg, I'm sure that'll jump up to 50 mpg here in a second. Yep, there's 50 mpg right there. So I'm sure if we just keep riding casual like this, that number just continues going up until it maxes out at around 55 to 60 miles per gallon. So the real world testing holds up to what the spec sheets and everybody else online says. good to know. We are coming up towards the end of our test ride for today's video. I don't know that there were many other things I wanted to talk about. Let's see, we talked about competitive models, we talked about comfort in the saddle, we talked about my problem with the pricing on it. I guess here's one thing that we can maybe hit on. The used market for DRZ400s, the supermoto model specifically, seems to hold pretty solid. Even models that are 15, 20 years old at this point continue to be listed for anywhere between $2,000 to as much as $5,000, depending on condition, miles, and modifications that people think are worth what they paid for after putting them on their bike. But the old model, as well as it does hold up, and as usable as it is, and as much as you could save going for a pre-owned one, this new one I think really just feels so refined and just better. I've ridden an old DRZ400 and yeah, it's okay, but this is good, man. This is better than okay. This bike is great. This bike is fantastic, and I wish I didn't have to get off of it so soon because I'm really enjoying my ride, and I would love to add one of these to the stable if it could be had for less than, you know, $9,000 starting MSRP. Now, every dealership does incur the expense of having to assemble it the rest of the way together and getting them shipped in from Suzuki, so expect to pay more than the listed price on a new one, just because that is how the world of dealerships works. And you can call it scummy and scammy all you want, but it's the truth. There are people behind the scenes who they are paying to put these machines together, and they don't just show up here magically off the assembly line. They get shipped in, and there's a price to pay for that. So, say what you will about it, but I think it's pretty fair to ask some of it, and even if you don't want to pay all of it, that's totally fine. Maybe talk to the dealership, try to negotiate, and if there's a model that they want to get rid of bad enough, that's how sales works, man. But let's talk about it. All right, let's start with the negatives first. The first thing to bring up, this should be the most obvious. If you are focused on price to performance ratio, value per dollar, I don't think this bike has enough to warrant what Suzuki is asking for it. I think either we need more technology to warrant that price tag, which will make the bike heavier, which we don't want. So the true alternative is reduce the price, get dealerships rebates, and try to justify a little bit more for what people are paying Suzuki. Almost 10 grand for 40 horsepower? Nah. It's not particularly good at touring either. It's not really all that good for two-up riding, so if you want to carry a passenger, I would not recommend this. And although the horsepower output and the torque output might seem beginner-friendly, the taller seat height and the top-heavy nature of a dirt bike chassis might be a little intimidating for newer riders who don't have the vertical gift to get along with this bike. And as far as being able to do everything, yes, you can do some highway on it, but this bike doesn't like to be on it for very long, and it feels like you're really straining the motor anything over 70 or 75 miles per hour because 90 is our top speed. Two-up riding? No. Storage? No. Wind protection? No. Beginner friendliness? Maybe. If any of that applies to you, or you gel with 1 point, maybe, just maybe, look at the DR-Z4SM and say goodbye. But if you're someone who lives for twisty roads and wheelies on command and carving through traffic like a scalpel, this bike is built for you. Commuter by day and hooligan by night, the DR-Z4SM is raw and simple, and it finally gets the tech to keep up with today's standards. It's in such a weird spot with the price because the KTM and the Kawasaki both bring crazy value, and the KTM 690 and Husqvarna 701 models almost bring too much to the table for what's supposed to be a more lightweight and nimble machine. So though the price falls in between, I feel that it's still too high, but for what it is, the bike feels amazing. And as far as city riding, canyon bombing, or turning a boring ride into a stunt session, I don't know that there's many other machines that can hit it as well as the new DR-Z4SM. Suzuki kept it mostly simple, but they also kept it pretty smart with their decisions. But whether it's too little or too late is still TBD because this bike is still new for 2025, and that's the year that we're in right now. If they ever lower the price, in my opinion, or give dealerships those rebates that they'll so desperately need to move these metals, then I would say if everything else applies to you and you can get it at a good price, it's a good buy. Oh, and holy smokes, man, it is a hot one out here today at Big St. Charles Motorsports. Speaking of them, if you want to come buy one of these and you want to negotiate the price with me a little bit to make it worth your time and worth your dime, I'd be more than happy to have you as a guest. Just ask for Ian here at Big St. Charles Motorsports in the sales department. Be happy to help you out, and I would say put a face to a name, but we did that in our face reveal and earlier in this video. So let's go ahead and allow myself to take it in the outro and finish this up. See you there. Well, that's going to wrap this video up. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for getting me to 20,000 subscribers so that I could finally take that helmet off. I hope you enjoyed being face to face finally as much as I did, because let me tell you, it's just a breath of fresh air, quite literally, rather than recycled air in my helmet that sometimes made me feel asphyxiated. And I think might have killed some brain cells along the way, just out of being dumb. But if you enjoyed this content, please make sure you leave a like on it. If you want to see more stuff like this from me in the future, hit that subscribe button just to stay tuned, and maybe turn on notifications if you want to know whenever I upload so you don't miss them. Again, don't forget to check out those affiliate links in the description below, because whenever you shop there, I get a piece of the pie and some of the crumbs that the big companies get, which helps me make this channel better for you. For right now, I don't have anything else to add. That's going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a wonderful week. Ride safe.
Come on.